Fulton Sheen, God and the Intelligence. Continuation of Chapter 7 on Thomistic Answers to Modern Ideas. Angelic Intelligence. If there is to be continuity in the universe, it is fitting that there should be intelligent beings without bodies, which are called angels. It is to be regretted that many treatises on intelligence omit entirely a consideration of angelic intelligence, because angelology is properly the field of speculative theology. It does not follow that it has no place in philosophy. Angels belong to the hierarchy of beings. They are the highest created being in the universe, fitting in the universe order of things, and particularly in order of intelligence. They cannot be passed over without disturbing the equilibrium of the whole. The existence of angels is proved by revelation, and the reason itself, arguing from the due perspective of the universe, concludes the fitness of their existence. The perfection of the universe consists in ascending scale of likeness on the part of creatures to God. Now, we know that God creates by intelligence and will. If therefore the effect is perfectly similar to the cause, there should be purely intellectual beings. If they proposed a body, they would be determined to a particular mode of being, which would be at variance with the object of the intellect. Universal being. The perfection of the universe therefore demands the existence of purely intellectual beings, whom we call angels. At this point, all consideration of life in a biological sense is left behind. But life under the consideration of the immanent activity is still retained. Every living being has a certain immanent activity which is essential to it and without which it cannot exist. For separated substances like angels, the essential immanent act is a purely intellectual one. They have no other operation. Unlike the human intelligence, they are always in act. Therefore, is the first mark of higher immanence than the immanence manifested by our intelligence. We are in essential potency to natural knowledge before learning it. The angels, however, are only in accidental potency to natural knowledge. They have knowledge, but they may not always be considering it. This being so, much of the imperfection which was found in the human intelligence is done away with. We are radically and fundamentally in potency to knowledge, the angel only accidentally. Our intellect may be likened to a tablet on which nothing is written. The angelic intellect, on the contrary, may be likened to a tablet already written upon, or to a mirror in which is reflected the reason of things. It is worth noting at this point two details which will be considered more fully in the next chapter. First, the fact that a body is not absolutely necessary for intelligence as intelligence. And secondly, that since angels are pure intellectual beings, they have no need of either an active or a passive intellect. A consideration not only of the nature of the angelic intelligence, but also of the source of its knowledge, reveals an increasing immanence as compared with that of human intelligence. Our knowledge comes from the material universe. Angelic knowledge comes from God. Our knowledge is acquired. Angelic knowledge is infused. The manner in which a thing is naturally perfected follows the natural mode of its being. Our soul naturally is united to a body. Its intellectual perfection is affected, therefore, through the body by sense experience. If this were not so, the body would be useless. The angels, however, have no conjunction with a body. Hence, their intelligence is perfected without sense knowledge, received through a body, or, in other words, it is perfected by an intellectual influx from God. The power of the human intelligence is not complete naturally. It is progressive in its perfection. We advance in age and wisdom. The angelic intelligence, on the contrary, is naturally complete, owing to the infused ideas which it receives from God. Our intelligence may be likened to an empty vase, which can be filled by our own industry. The angelic intelligence is the vase already filled. It receives its knowledge at the same moment that it receives its intellectual nature. God, as the object of knowledge, is not possessed as eminently by man as by an angel. The idea which we have of God is not a similitude drawn from him immediately, but is in part taken from the visible things of the world. It may be likened to a knowledge of an object which we see reflected in a mirror. The angel, however, knows God by a certain similitude, just as we know a stone by its similitude which appears in the eye. The similitude produced in the angelic intelligence has God as its source and cause, just as the stone is proximate source of its similitude in the eye. The imminent activity of the angel is manifestly higher than that of animals or man. Its life is therefore more perfect, yet it lacks something which would give it the perfect imminence which is the characteristic of perfect life. The very fact that their ideas are infused, and that they have been given to them by God himself, is quite sufficient to stamp them with some imperfection. It constitutes their measure. Though the term of their activity is imminent, it is not their substance. The equation being knowing cannot be made of angels. Like all other creatures, there is a kind of composition in them which stamps them as imperfect. From the lowest form of mineral to the highest species of animals, there is, then, an increasing imminence manifested, and with each increase of imminence, there is realized a more perfect nature. But at the same time, there is something measured throughout this whole scale of beings. The plant is measured by its form, the animal by its instinct or end, and man by the first principles of his speculative and practical intellect, and angels by the ideas which they receive from God. The ultimate perfection of life is not reserved for any of these creatures. Divine intelligence. The modern philosopher asks, where is the richer, fuller, and more satisfying life? The angelic doctor asks the same question in the Summa. In these words, is God life? The answer of the angelic doctor is as follows. Life is imminent activity. It is the power to move oneself in contradiction to being moved by another. The more perfectly, therefore, imminent activity belongs to anything, the more perfectly does it possess life. In the divine intelligence, being and knowing are identical. That which the divine intelligence possesses is not determined by anything extrinsic to itself, as we shall prove. Possessing perfect imminent activity, God therefore possesses perfect life. God is life. When therefore it is said that God is life, something more than a mere metaphor is implied. He is life in such a true and real sense that he merits being called, in the words of St. Augustine, the life of all life. The fundamental and ultimate reason why God is life is that he is a supreme intelligence, that thing whose nature is its act of understanding, and which in what is naturally possesses is in no way determined by another. In the supreme life, hence it is that Aristotle, in the 12th book of his Metaphysics, after having shown that God is intelligence, concludes that he has the most perfect and eternal life, because his intellect is the most perfect and always in act. Such is the scholastic answer to the philosophical search for life. If our search is for the ultimate and the perfect life, then the life is the eternal, omnipotent, and living God. The richer, fuller, and more satisfying life is not in any evolving space-time or divine imagining or eternal becoming. These fictions do not possess life. They are merely in the process of attaining it. The having is more than the acquiring. The being is more than the becoming. If we are sincere in our search for the most perfect life, we must rest in the intelligence, inasmuch as its activity is immanent. It is life itself. There is therefore no question whether or not the intelligence is adopted to life. It is life. Modern philosophy, then, is refusing to accept the intelligence has been untrue to its ideals and its principles. It insists on a devotion to the spirit of the age and the conclusion of modern science, biology in particular. But modern biology explains life by an immanent principle. Consistency demands that life in all its manifestations be measured by the immanence of its activity. A rigorous application of this principle, it has been demonstrated, leads to the intelligence, and ultimately to the divine intelligence, which is identical with the being of God, pleading on the one hand for a philosophy in keeping with science, and on the other hand for a philosophy which is out of harmony with science. Many of our modern thinkers manifest an infidelity to their ideals. The philosophy of the angelic doctor, on the contrary, applies his principle throughout the whole gamut of existence, from the plant up to God himself. If the world is intelligible and orderly, the principles should be orderly. What is true in one order should not be false in another. If life is immanent activity in biology, it cannot be transitive activity in spacetime, or divinal, imaginal, or finite God. In adopting a mode of knowledge which is transitive, modern anti-intellectualists have been getting away from the heart of life. It may therefore be said to be characterized by a great incapacity for life. Second principle. Modern philosophy, affected in part by biology, has greatly insisted on the necessity and continuity of the universe. The scholastic system is reproached and rejected for having failed to show fluidity in the universe. Its proofs are said to be valid only on the hypothesis that the universe is split up into blocks of compartments. The ideal of contemporary thinking is to get away as far as possible from this so-called lifeless universe and to express the continuity of the universe which the hypothesis of evolution has so wonderfully revealed to us. The ideal of modern philosophy is legitimate. It is also the ideal of common sense philosophy. The only difference is that the latter did not have to wait for biology to reveal progress in the universe. Reason saw its necessity. The scholastic principle of progress and continuity is metaphysical and not biological. It applies to all the kingdoms of the universe and with greater applicability and logic than any of the modern applications. The continuity and fluidity of the universe may be viewed either statically or dynamically. Statically, the continuity is revealed in the unfolding of the principle. A higher nature in its lowest perfection touches a lower nature in its highest perfection. Dynamically, the same conclusion is revealed in the application of the principle. The more perfect the nature, the less the movement. The first principle natura superior in suo infirmo contingit naturam inferiorem in ejus supremo, is taken from the fourth book of Divinis Nominibus of Dionysius, and is used frequently throughout the works of the angelic doctor to prove the organic nature of the universe and the manner in which all things contribute to its beauty. In its application, the principle is best seen in his commentary on the De Anima of Aristotle. Here we shall content ourselves with a brief indication of its general outline. Passing over the close biological resemblance to be found between the highly developed plant and the lowest stage of animal life, the interesting ourselves purely in the philosophical side, we find the highest development of the plant life to be its imminent activity of generation, growth, and nutrition, which are the functions of the vegetable soul. It is just at this point that the animal life joins the plant life. The lowest operations of the animal life are the operations of the vegetable life. Thus there is a communion between plant and animal life. The highest perfection of animal life, in its turn, is its power to know through the senses. This perfection marks off distinctly from the lower order, and is also the bond which unites it to the order above it, namely the human intelligence. The phantasm is common to both animal and man, but it differs in each according to the respective differentiations of being. According to its real being, it is sensible. According to its esse relatientiae, it is intelligible. Thus, what is highest in a lower order touches the lowest in a higher order. The lowest perfection of man in relation to the order just below him. In sense knowledge, it is as necessary for his cognitional existence as the vegetative soul is for his animal existence. Instead of being cut off from the animal, man enjoys a fellowship with the perfection of animal existence. He continues, in a certain sense, that which constitutes the glory of the animal. So intimate and so close is this relationship between animal perfection and the human species, that it may truly be said that the operation of the human intelligence, the two, are never separated. The angelic doctor, rejecting the doctrine of imageless thought, holds that there is a constant reversion to phantasm on the part of the intelligence. This one notion shows what a complete stranger he is to a rigid block universe in which there is neither continuity nor progress between the various orders. But to carry the principle further, what is the highest perfection of the human intelligence? It is a kind of intellectual perception and intuition by which it seizes essence and truth in judgments. This intuition is feeble, as a following chapter will demonstrate, but it is nevertheless the link between it and the next highest order of the intelligence, namely the angelic. All angelic knowledge is by intuition. It does not abstract, as the human mind does. It does not reason, as we do. It sees. Its whole intellectual life is an intuition. The principle of continuity and progress of the universe thus finds its application in a domain which far transcends the purely material order. There are in the angelic order alone a progress and a continuity of perfection which greatly exceeds those which are manifested in the material universe. The details of this gradually progress from the species of the angel, which stands next to the man, and the species of the angel which is nearest to God, are beyond the privilege of our earthly knowledge. Revelation, however, has given us a peep into the mysterious and wonderful hierarchy of order and the angelic doctor. Working on these data has thrown much light on the application of our principle. There are 3 hierarchies of angels, and 3 choirs in each hierarchy, making a total of 9 choirs. Each choir, from the lowest, that of guardian angel, to the highest, the seraphim, has a continuity, one with the other, by reason of the intellectual illumination which they receive. Each angel transmits to the angel immediately inferior the knowledge which it receives from above. It does not transmit this illumination in its fullness and perfection, but according to the capacity of the lower intelligence, just as a learned scientist does not transmit principles of science to his intellectual inferiors without examples. This transmission of illumination from the higher to the lower choirs, according to their intelligence, is the very reason of the continuity of the 9 choirs and of the ordination by which the highest perfection of one choir is linked with the lowest perfection of the superior choir. No creature, however perfect, by the mere fact of its inherent imperfection, can fill the gap between itself and God. This does not forbid a more perfect participation of the divine perfection by one creature rather than another. The highest order of intellectual creatures is the seraphim, who, because of their more perfect knowledge of God, have a more perfect love of him. Their very name signifies flame and light and love. This is their highest perfection. There is not a continuity between creatures and God in the possession of being. In the pantheistic sense, but there is a continuity of order and an analogical possession of being. The universe is not a juxtaposition of indifferentiality related genius and species, as ill-advised opponents of common sense philosophy would have us believe. It is harmonious crescendo of perfection, from the lowest minerals up to God, a hymn of the Creator. Even this brief narration of the continuity in the intellectual order alone is sufficient to stress its importance. The intelligence is the key to the communion of the human and the angelic and divine. From God, who is the source of intellectual light, knowledge descends progressively through the 3 hierarchies and 9 choirs of angels, and finally to man himself, who in his turn not only seizes the intelligibility which is multiplied in the sensible, thanks to all things being the material realizations of the eternal ideas of God, but even projects his own intelligibility into matter under the form of finality. It becomes feebler as it grows in distance from its source, just as the rays and the heat of the sun become enfeebled as they are removed further from their source. But this is only a proof that the progressive order of the perfections which are found in creatures find their own reason and perfection in God. Modern philosophy, in rejecting the intelligence, has rejected the cornerstone of the whole edifice of continuity and progress in the universe. In ideal, it has given man an angelic intelligence, and thus has broken continuity with the lower orders. In fact, it has given man a degenerate sense of knowledge and has broken continuity with the higher order, pleading for continuity and progress and insisting on the application of biological hypothesis to metaphysics. It has in the end denied the possibility of continuity by rejecting the intelligence. Scholasticism, on the contrary, did not have to wait for modern biology to reveal continuity and progress in the universe. For it, biological discoveries were confirmations, not revelations. They merely proved in a lower order that reason had already verified in the higher order. The criticism which the Philosophia Perennis would urge against a philosophy which breaks down the continuity and the progress of the universe by rejecting the intelligence would be precisely this, that it is a philosophy of the block universe. A third principle. A third and legitimate ideal of modern philosophy is to explain life, not only according to its progressiveness and continuity, but also as a process of unification, applying biological conclusions throughout the whole field of philosophy. Modern writers have concluded that the present stage of evolution sums up all the previous stages, that the moral ideas of man are heritages of his animal existence, and that religion is a legacy of our primal fear of brute nature. It has been too readily presumed by this class of thinkers that common sense philosophy has been a complete and total stranger to any such philosophy of unification. Yet St. Thomas, throughout the whole of his Summa, is constantly recurring to the principle of unification that runs through the universe. But he is not in perfect accord with those who have broken away from the tradition of his school. For him, the principle of the unification is valid only on condition that there is no subordination of the higher to the lower order. It is this precisely which constitutes the modern principle. Which of the two is the more legitimate? We shall have occasion presently to examine. There is such an order in things that the more perfect the nature, the greater is its unifying power, and the more universal is its object. Such is the Thomistic principle. As a matter of fact, the vegetable kingdom bears out its truth. The vegetable kingdom is higher than the mineral kingdom, as life is higher than matter. Those things which are desperate in the mineral kingdom, such as hydrogen, oxygen, phosphates, chlorides, and the like, plant unifies through its threefold operation. In going down to the lower kingdom for the materials which it unifies in order to carry on its own existence, it does not destroy them, rather it utilizes them, and endows them with a mode of existence which they did not possess before. It ennobles and perfects them. The animal kingdom verifies the principles with still greater clearness. Here there is not a single process of unification, but a double one, the philosophical and the cognitive. Philosophically, it unites the mineral and the vegetable kingdoms through the operations of nutrition. Endowed with a sensitive soul, the animal can possess these two lower kingdoms without itself by an act of sense knowledge. This possession and unification is far nobler than the other, for it possesses them in an ennobled way without the same time altering their own mode of existence. To possess a thing not materially, but formally, which is the definition of knowledge, is the noblest manner of having or possessing it. The cow is consuming the prairie flower, unifies it within itself by destroying the proper existence of the flower, but in possessing it formally, by an act of sense knowledge, it unifies it within itself without destroying the proper existence of the flower. In considering man, let us omit the philosophical consideration in order to consider only those which are related to the act of knowledge. The faculties of the soul are arranged in a hierarchy according to the universality of their objects. The higher the faculty, the more universal is its object. The lowest faculty is that of vegetative soul, whose object is the body, to which it is united. The sensitive faculty has a more universal object, and has a greater unifying power, inasmuch as its object is not the sensible body to which it is united, but the totality of sensible bodies. The disparate knowledge of the five senses is unified by a general and common sense. This sense knows all that the five senses know, and even something which the external sense cannot know. For example, the difference between whiteness and sweetness. But man has a higher power of unification than that of the common sense. In virtue of his intellectual faculty, he sizes not only sensible bodies in general, as does the sensitive faculty, but being in all its universality, all that is disparate and separate in the world of sense, he can unite in the world of his intelligence. All the particular experience of his sensitive nature he can unify in a law. All that exists on earth, above the earth, and under the earth, he can unite under the analogical notion of being. Aristotle has rightly called man a microcosm, for in him all the lower kingdoms are united, and even the higher, by negation and analogy. Besides unifying, recapitulating, and utilizing what is of a lower order, man, in addition, elevates it. In possessing eminently and formally all the lower kingdoms, man continues their existence in a very ennobled way. He so elevates the lower kingdoms that it may be said, in a certain sense, that man is the mineral that blooms, the plant that feels, the animal that speaks. It is his nature to be the concerted harmony, living and permanent, of all these various lives. This recapitulating power of the human intelligence is not absolutely the same in all men. Even the human intelligence admits of various degrees. The mental power of some men is greater than that of others. The trained mind can see more in one idea or one principle than that of the unschooled can see in many. The angelic doctor, for example, saw many more conclusions in the one principle, that nothing moves unless it is moved by another, than the generality of philosophers and theologians. This variability of unifying power is borne out by the fact that multiplied examples and figures of the imagination are necessary to communicate to a pupil that which the teacher sees in a single principle. Similarly, our intellect being imperfect, we cannot represent the perfection of God by a single idea, but must use diverse and multiplied conceptions, goodness, truth, omnipotence, and the like. If, however, our intellect were perfect, we could represent God by one single idea, just as the Verbum, the second person of the Blessed Trinity, is the perfect image and splendor of the Father. The principle, the higher the nature, the greater is the power of unifying, has an even greater application in the angelic kingdom. What is the separated in the lower order is united in the higher. What is plural in the lower order is singular in the higher. As we approach God, we approach unity and perfection. As we descend from God, we descend into multiplicity and imperfection. The human species has a twofold principle of knowledge, that of sense, that of intellect. Just as it unites into the common sense the findings of the five disparate sense of the sensible order, so too do the angelic species unite the findings of the sense and the intellect, which is common to man. Man knows by sense and intellect, the angel by intellect alone. The single principle of the knowledge for the angels is that intelligence which is enriched and infused ideas from God. These infused ideas are far richer than other ideas. They unify that which is disparate in our knowledge. Our conceptual knowledge does not reveal all the particular determinations of a certain idea, but the angelic intelligence does. It sees all the possible realizations of an idea. In the idea of man, it sees all the particular men of the universe. The same is true of judgments. Composite things the angel knows simply. Mobile things the angel knows immovably. Material things the angel knows immaterially. All material things pre-exist in the angels more simply and immaterially than they exist in themselves, but more multiplied and imperfectly than they exist in God. Though this possession of innate ideas is common to all the angels, all do not possess the same ideas. This is the foundation of their distinction. God has more richly endowed some angels than others. As beings more closely approach God, the more perfect they become. As angels more nearly approximate the perfection of God, they possess fewer ideas. The angel of the lowest species has many more ideas than the angel of the higher species, but the latter has a far richer intelligence. As a man in a tower sees more of the city than a man in the street, so too does the superior angel, with a few rich and universal ideas, see more in them than an inferior angel sees in multiplied ideas. The superior angels know with lesser movement than the inferior. In a word, the superiority of the angels increases as the number of their ideas decreases. Though there be an infinity of degrees of graduated perfection, inasmuch as every angel is a distinct species, we can distinguish three principal grades of knowledge. The angels of the first hierarchy are turned directly towards God. They know intelligible essence inasmuch as they proceed directly from God. This hierarchy of angels, in the words of Dionysius, is in the very vestibule of the divinity. The second hierarchy of angels knows the intelligible essence to the universal cause of creation, that is, in a plurality of objects. The third hierarchy considers them in their determination to particular effects, that is, in a multiplicity of objects equal to the number of created things. Though there is a progress towards unity and recapitulation of knowledge through the whole sphere of creation, no creature manifests a perfect recapitulation. Even the highest seraphim has an idea which is distinct from its essence. The plenitude of intelligibility is found only in the being in whom knowing and being are identical. The object of God's knowledge is a unique object which unites within itself all the multiplied knowledge of his creatures. He alone, who stands at the summit of all things, possesses all things within himself according to the simplicity of his being. As in physical order, concentrated power is greater than dispersed power, so too in the intellectual order, the intelligence which unifies all things is greater than the intelligence which knows them only indisparately and disjointed. The higher the intellect, the more perfect it is. The more perfect it is, the more unified it is. The mere fact of having an intelligence is not a simple perfection. Therefore, rather it is to know all things as one and yet without confusion, and by a knowledge which is identical with one's being. In God alone is found this absolute perfection. Every idea is apprehended according to the intelligent being in whom it resides. In God, intelligence and essence are the same. The intelligence is consequently in act with the intelligible. And hence, in God, the supreme knowledge and the supreme intelligibility join one another. He knows himself perfectly. Man has different kinds of knowledge according to the different objects of his knowledge. He has intelligence as regards the knowledge of principles. He has science as regards the knowledge of conclusions. He has wisdom according as he knows the highest cause. He has counsel or prudence according as he knows what is to be done. But God knows all there is by one single act of knowledge. Knowledge is not a quality in God, nor a habit, but a substance and an act. The object which God knows by himself and immediately in is himself. It is evident that in order to know immediately an object other than himself, God ought to turn himself from the immediate object, which is himself, to another object. But this other object cannot be inferior to himself. Otherwise, God would be imperfect. How then does God know other things? In this way, it is manifest that he perfectly understands himself. Otherwise, his existence would not be perfect, since his existence is his act of understanding. Now, if anything is perfectly known, it follows of necessity that its power is perfectly known. But the power of anything can be perfectly known only by knowing to what its power extends. Since, therefore, the divine power extends to other things by the very fact that it is the first effective cause of all things, as is clear from the aforesaid Q2, Art 3, God must necessarily know things other than himself, and this appears still more plainly if we add that the very existence of the first effective cause, viz., God, is his own act of understanding. Hence, whatever effects pre-exist in God, as in the first cause, must be in his act of understanding, and all things must be in him, according to an intelligible mode. For everything that is in another is in it according to the mode of that in which it is. Now, in order to know how God knows things other than himself, we must consider that a thing is known in two ways, in itself and in another. A thing is known in itself when it is known by the proper species adequate to the knowledgeable object, as when the eye sees a man through the image of a man. A thing is seen in another through the image of that which contains it, as when a part is seen in the whole by the image of the whole, or when a man is seen in a mirror by the image in a mirror, or by any other mode by which one thing is seen in another. So we say that God sees himself in himself because he sees through his essence, and he sees other things not in themselves but in himself, inasmuch as his essence contains the similitude of things other than himself. So far, therefore, as God knows his essence as capable of such imitation by any creature, he knows it as the type and idea of that creature, and in like manner as regards other creatures. In God, as in the cause, exists everything that is to be found in things. All things that are in the world are but participations of this divine and perfect knowledge. Everything that is multiple in the universe is simple in him, and without confusion. Everything that is disparate in the universe is united in him. For in him all things exist, not according to their own material or participated existence, but according to his own perfect being. His knowledge is anterior to material existence of things. It is not dependent on them. They are not the measure of his intelligence. Rather, they are measured by it. The universe is a great pyramid, at the base of which stand the lower kingdoms, which are deprived of that godlike intelligence. As this pyramid tapers to a point, the intelligence grows in increasing perfection, uniting more within itself with less effort and movement. As the general sense of man unites the disparate five senses, so do ideas unite disparate sensations by giving the very reason of their being. As the intelligence unites the sense, so does the angel unite both sense and intellect. As the higher species of angels unites the ideas of the inferior species, so does God unite within himself all things as cause and creator. If therefore philosophy would find the richer, fuller, and more satisfying life, if it would find and express that life as continuous and fluid, if it would also reveal any stage of life as recapitulation of all that has gone before, it must accept the intelligence. There is no question as to whether or not it is suited for life. It is life. It is supreme and perfect kind of life. It is the only title a being has to permanence. Da mihi intellectum et vivam, cried the psalmist. Give me intelligence and I will live. Organic life is only the feeblest participation in the divine life. It is only the shadow of the substance. Without the intelligence, there can be no continuity and no fluidity in the universe. What the heart is to man, that intelligence is, and even more to the universe. Discard the intelligence, and you create a gap in the universe that no instinct or imaginal can fill. The gradual progress of kingdoms, or evolution, if we choose to call it such, becomes impossible. There is progress until man is reached. Then there is retrogression. Recognize the intelligence, and you have a harmonious progression of perfection, reaching even to God himself. Posit intelligence, and evolution becomes intelligible. Deny it, and it becomes absurd. In like manner, the recapitulation which evolution seems to demand becomes impossible without the intelligence. The pyramid of unification breaks in the middle unless there is given a spiritual faculty which can contain without destroying the disparate faculties of animal life. By no other title than that of intelligence is man the spokesman of the universe. By no other way is it given to man to carry the whole universe back to its God. Without intelligence, the bond between God and the material universe is merely one of casualty. With intelligence standing between these two orders, the bond is one of knowledge and love. The recognition of intelligence is the key to the problems of philosophy. Between those who accept and those who reject it, there is an almost unabridged abyss. The extreme are as life and death. M. Bergson has called the intelligence death. The angelic doctor calls it the supreme and perfect kind of life. James has called it a beast because it destroys and tears reality to pieces. Aristotle has called it divine because it apprehends without destroying. Dr. Schiller has said it prevents us from gathering the golden apples in the garden of Hesperides. St. Thomas declares it reveals to us the distinction between the Dead Sea apples and the tree of the fruit of life, and thus leads us into the very garden of pleasure, for it leads us to God himself. Intrinsically, intelligence is a perfection that transcends all the visible things of the universe. It is greater than the sun and the moon, greater than planets and animals, all the material productions of man, and this because it is capable of knowing and desiring the supreme and ultimate good, God.